Hey guys, welcome back to Foxhill Homestead. I'm Sarah, and today I'm going to tell you how to revive a starter that maybe you haven't messed with in a while. The things that you will need for this is, of course, your sourdough starter. I like to use a scale. You don't necessarily have to, but I prefer to weigh it. And then some filtered water and some flour. Right now we are using some unbleached all-purpose flour. Typically I use whole wheat in this starter, but if you have a starter, you know they're not very fickle. So, and a stirring mechanism. I like to use these baking things so that you can scrape the sides really easily, and a measuring cup. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to assess the state of your starter. So my starter typically lives in the fridge unless I have been doing a lot of baking lately. Now it's the summertime and it's kind of the season of our life where we're not really doing a lot of bread baking because we don't want the oven on all the time. So I haven't been using it very often. So what you want to do after you've left it in the fridge for too long, or maybe you've left it on the counter for too long, you just kind of want to check what it looks like. So you'll want to look for a few things when you're trying to make sure that your starter is still good to go and can be revived. If it still has some bubbles in it, then that's good. That's really what we're looking for. When you're looking at it, you just want to make sure this is the number one thing that if your starter has in it, you cannot do anything with it and it's done, and that's mold. You cannot get the mold out. You just have to throw it away and start over, which is unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way it goes. The good news is it takes a lot of neglect for your starter to get mold in it. So mine doesn't have mold. It's really bubbly still, and it actually doesn't have any hooch on it either. So you might sometimes see a clear liquid that has developed on the top layer or a black liquid. That's called hooch. If you don't want that, you can just pour the liquid off into the sink or wherever. You might even be able to pour it out into your animals' food. They might like that. If you want your sourdough starter to be a lot more sour, then just go ahead and stir it in, which is what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and just stir this up, and you can see I have very little starter in here, and that's because when I'm going through the season where I'm not using it a lot, I try not to keep too much so that I'm not wasting money by just throwing flour in every week and not using it very much. When I'm using it a lot, I keep a lot more. That's why it's in this big jar. So we're going to get it all stirred up, and then when you're stirring it up, you can probably tell what it smells like just by opening it. I can. So, you want to smell it? So you're looking for a slightly sweet and sour smell, kind of like yeast if you've ever walked into a bakery. It's a little bit more sour version of, it's a little bit more of a sour version of fresh baked bread. So mine smells really nice and sweet. There's different scents that maybe will happen in your sourdough starter, and for the most part, all of those scents are going to mean you need to feed it more. So some say that it smells like rubbing alcohol or like hydrogen peroxide. I've never had that happen, but you should still be able to go forward. You just need to feed it a lot more often and kind of assess what's going on. I've had a Parmesan cheese smell, believe it or not, and I just fed it some more and it was fine. So comment below if you have a sourdough starter and you've had any smells other than the ones I've mentioned. I have only really had the cheesy and the yeasty smell. Right now mine's a little bit too sour, so that just means I need to give it some love. I haven't fed it in a couple of weeks, and when you leave it in the refrigerator, you can do that. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn on this food scale, and I like to make mine in grams. So there we go, it's on grams. And I like to write on the side of my jar. You can't really see it because I use dry erase marker, but I know it's 742 grams because I've had it in this jar for a while. So what I recommend is either use permanent marker and just have a designated sourdough starter jar, or you can use painter's tape and write on top of it, or duct tape or anything like that. So I'm going to, so it says 891 grams, so usually I just subtract the tare. Okay, so I have about 150 grams of starter in there. I do 100% hydration, which just means a 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. So I will do 150 grams of flour and 150 grams of water. And this is the measuring cup I'm going to use, and I'm going to kind of go back and forth. That way it mixes a lot easier. I found that if you do all of your flour at once and then all of your water, it's kind of hard to mix. So I do back and forth. So I'll do 50 grams at a time. And I'm going to start with the water and actually just, nope, that's what I'm going to use for the flour. You want to make sure to use water that doesn't have any chlorine or fluoride in it, because that will prevent, that's a mess. Haha, 50 grams. If you use water with fluoride or chlorine in it, it's going to prevent the natural bacteria from doing its job. So you just want to make sure you filter your water. You can actually just leave water out open on the counter overnight and it will get rid of the chlorine that way. So now I'm going to use some flour. And some sourdough purists say you should never use metal with your sourdough starter, but I like to break the rules. So that's about 50. So I'm going to go ahead and stir it up. Each time I'm putting flour and water in there, I am just balancing the scale so that it's back down to 0. I've tried just adding 50 on top of each one, but then I find myself forgetting exactly how much I've put in there. So I'll just keep that in there, and then when you zero it, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so we're going to go back to water. This is a very monotonous process, but okay, that's a little bit over 50, but that's fine. It's not an exact science. Zero it out. The only reason I use a scale is because I'm not very good at eyeballing what a cup is in the jar. So you don't necessarily have to use a scale if you don't want to. Okay. And so last time I had like 65, so I'll go with just about 40-ish grams. Seems about right. And then some more flour. Now that you've mixed everything in, you've fed your starter. Some people like to kind of measure what the level is. It kind of depends on the day for me. I don't have a rubber band, so I'm not going to do that right now. But basically what you could do is put a rubber band around where the level is, and then every few hours just check on it and see how much it has risen or doubled. The goal is for in a couple of hours for the starter to double in size, and about, I'd say 4 hours would probably be realistic for a lot of really good starters. My starter is actually not very old and it's not very active. I don't use it for baking as much as I use the discard. So mine will probably be ready to go in about 12 hours. And so what I'm going to do for the next few days is I will go in and every 12 hours I will do the same thing. I will discard about half, and the reason you need to do that is because you need to keep putting in the same amount of flour and water as there is starter. So now, since I have put in 150 grams of flour and 150 grams of water, I now have 450 grams of starter. So then I would have to do the same thing with the water and the flour. So I'm not going to do that because that's kind of wasteful. So you would just take out half or as much as you want to feed it, or you can use that discard if you want. Use it for pancakes. You can literally just do a sourdough skillet and put it on a cast iron skillet with some butter and seasonings, and it's like a little flatbread. So you can do a lot with that, but basically just make sure you remove a good amount of the starter. So when you're done mixing your starter, you want to make sure to cover it, but not cover too tightly. So I can just put the lid down on this jar and leave it open. That just makes sure that all of that good bacteria can get in. If you have a jar that doesn't have a lid like this, a lot of people I've seen use these tea towels. This is a really basic, just white one, but all you do is just cover it up, and then the good bacteria can still get in. But you don't necessarily have to do that. That's why I have this jar like this. That is how to, can you take this? So that is how you can revive your starter and tell if it's even worth saving. And hopefully you all have some really nice bubbly sourdough starters that you can make delicious breads with. Comment down below if you have any recommendations, and then like I said earlier, tell us if you have any yucky smells that you've had in your starter before. I would love to read about the different smells because I find it really fascinating. Other than that, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and hit the like button if you want to see more videos like this.